Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, I want to thank you very much for joining me today. And I've got some questions about the strategic situation that I'm sure you've got a great deal to comment on. And two questions. Number one, is this an appropriate moment for another war in the Middle East? And what would be the consequences if the Israelis do launch such an attack?
First, I think this is a highly inappropriate time for another war in Western Asia, or the Middle East as we call it. We've already got one just wrapped up, which is falling apart, even as I speak. We've got another one ongoing with no end in sight, that one in Afghanistan, and the global war on terror, which ranges from the Horn of Africa to Somalia, all around the Maghreb and elsewhere in Africa, and as far as I know, all over the world. We don't need a fourth war. Israel is another imponderable in this entire issue. One, Israel does not have the military capacity to inflict much damage on Iran. It could fly long-range strikes at the very end of its operational tether, if you will, and it could drop a few bombs, but it would do very little damage. It would probably be a pinprick in terms of damage. But what would Iran do in reaction to that? Would it send some of its missiles towards Tel Aviv, Haifa, or some other place in Israel? And then what will we do in reaction to that? The real fear here is that Israel will administer this pinprick with complete knowledge that we're going to follow her and make it more than a pinprick. That's what I worry about. So the answer to your question is Israel could not do much, but we would probably follow and do a lot. And second, we certainly don't need another war in Western Asia.
The recent extrajudicial killing of Anwar al-Awlaki and a second American citizen in that incident, and then a few weeks later, the murder of his son in a follow-on drone attack in Yemen. We're dealing here with 3 American citizens. We certainly don't know the total number of American citizens who might have been subject to this extrajudicial execution. But I wonder if you could comment further on this.
I think this is doing this sort of thing, taking American citizens' lives, no matter how heinous they might be or how criminal their acts might be, without due process of law, is an outright, clear, unmistakable violation of the Constitution of the United States. There are people in this government, and I know there are people in the previous government, I served it, who don't believe the first 10 amendments to the Constitution should have been passed in the first place because they're impediments to their power. And I don't know what we do about this. This is clearly unconstitutional, but the Congress, who is supposed to be, sort of a check on the executive when this sort of thing happens, and the court, which is supposed to be the legal determinant of whether an act is constitutional or not, seem to be the lackeys of the administration. So where do you go? I'll tell you where you go. You go to the people.
I know that you're in touch with many other retired military officers, retired intelligence people, and how would you characterize the view of this present moment of crisis? How do you see where we need to go at this point to begin to get back to our actual Republican heritage?
I think the thing that concerns most of my former colleagues, some of whom are still active in almost every walk of life, whether it be actually in the government or advising the government or in some way studying the government or whatever, the real concern at bottom is the economy. Because everyone from soldier to academic understands that without a strong, functioning, with a future economy, you don't have anything else. You don't have the well-being of numbers of your population that you need, as Eisenhower constantly talked about the middle class, which is why he kept the tax on the wealthiest in America at over 90% for his entire 8 years. A good Republican, he. You don't have that sense, as Eisenhower kept saying in NSC meeting after NSC meeting, you don't have that sense of psychological well-being, of even, he said, spiritual well-being, if you don't have the bulk of your people employed, gainfully employed, and looking ahead to the future, thinking that their children are going to have a higher standard of living than they have, a better life than they have, working for that life, working for that future. If you don't have that, and you don't have the fundamentally sound economy wrapped around that, you're lost. So that's the problem, I think, that's concerning most of my colleagues right now.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you very much for taking the time. I know you're extremely busy and very actively involved in what I would characterize as a very critical war avoidance mobilization on the part of our most well-informed and preciously few leading citizens. And I hope we can continue this discussion in the very near future.
Well, thanks for having me.